Oh shit. Hey guys. Alright, I'm back. I posted this video already. I already made it. I had to remake it though because the sound wasn't working. The sound wasn't working because I was cutting some video so I could do a film study on Alexander the Nail. I'm not going to say his last name, you guys. Don't try to tell me how to say it, man, because I'm not going to get it. Nobody on HBO probably says it right, so I'm not going to say it right either. So this is my second time recording this video. So the first thing I want to talk about is I had like a little hiatus last week because of some copyright strikes. I actually just put out my film study, not my film, well it's a part 4 or part 5 film study for Crawford versus Felix Diaz / analysis for how I thought the fight was going to go if you guys are interested. I picked Crawford to win by ass beating. I thought that he was going to dominate Indongo. I didn't do any keys to victories for the fight because, to be honest, I didn't think that Indongo had a fucking chance in hell to beat Crawford. Just no way to beat him. And it showed all the signs of that. You know, Crawford dominated him. He took away all of Indongo's offense. And he didn't even have to be super offensive himself. You know, he didn't have to put a lot of pressure. And it was really interesting in my fight breakdown. I talk about how Crawford wasn't being super active with his control. Like if you watch the first few rounds, of the Diaz fight, Crawford was using a lot of control against Diaz. And like using his lead hand to probe and to keep him on the outside, make him fight around it. And then there were spots in the fight where Crawford stopped doing that, and I got the sense that he was only doing that so that he could get Diaz to open up so that he could counter him. And I talk about in my prediction video a little bit how I thought that would be the only way that I think Indongo could even have a chance against Crawford, is when Crawford tries to counter him, right? But also, as we saw, and another thing I talk about in the prediction video is that Crawford was going to utilize his ability to fight fighters who step with their punches. You know, and that was one wrinkle that we saw from Indongo, that he didn't know how to break. You know, he couldn't figure out a way to throw punches without stepping with his lead hand and flashing it out there, or throwing a punch, but also stepping at the same exact time. And Crawford was able to pick him apart on every front. And it was really interesting because you saw flashes of it in the Diaz fight where Diaz would step with his punch and Crawford was able to counter him while he was coming inside. And Crawford did the exact same thing to Indongo all night long. Every time Indongo would flash that lead hand, Crawford would just take a small step back and then counter him with the right hook to the head. And he wasn't always landing, but he was getting closer and closer. And there was one, they show a highlight in between rounds where Crawford just nails him with the shot. And it's all based off of the fact that Indongo doesn't know how to fight any other way. He's a very, basic fighter in the same regard to like, I'm not gonna try to put nobody else on blast, but very limited offense. As we saw when we analyzed the first 4 rounds of Ricky Burns, he really only had one way to figure out how to score. It was effective against Ricky Burns because Ricky Burns didn't have a game plan. He didn't understand what he was going up against or how to counter it. He just didn't have the tools or the skills, right, to combat it, and it showed, and it made Indongo look really good. Whereas in this fight, Crawford knew exactly what he was going to do, and right from the outside of the bell, you saw him not using his lead hand to control Indongo, kind of inviting him in, because he saw the pattern. You could see it, a mile away, just watching the first round against Ricky Burns, flashing the lead hand, taking lead foot dominance or whatever, and then throwing a left hand. And it was very simple, and Crawford, countered it beautifully, just taking a step back and then countering him with the right hook, and then the one that actually ended the fight, the left hand to the body. Beautiful work from Crawford. Another thing that he was doing very well is, again, Indongo doesn't know how to punch without stepping with his shot. He didn't know how to just stand in front and use angles or create openings. So even the jabs that he was throwing when he wasn't following up with the straight left hand, he would step with his jab and even feint with it, or throw a jab, but he would just come straight back to his guard. And Crawford was actually following him back and catching him with shots. So he would initially take a small step back with one of his feet, put his weight on his back leg to get ready for the left hand, and then when the left hand wouldn't come, he would follow him back with his own left hand or his own jab. He knew exactly how Indongo was going to fight. He just dominated him, and Indongo didn't really have any answers for him, and he was able to just kind of destroy him. I was a little surprised, and it was a great tactic from Crawford. But I was really surprised that he was doing it to the head or to the body and not the head, because usually Crawford doesn't throw a lot of body punches. He usually does go to the head for those flashy knockouts, but this one was just surprised. I would say everyone was surprised that he just went to the body instead, and it was a brilliant move. With as tall as Indongo is, covering all that space to the body was going to be much more difficult than the head. And I think that also Indongo, because I don't want to say because he was reaching, but his punch technique, the way that he does it, he kind of covers his head kind of well and covers his chin kind of well when he's punching. So props to Indongo on that front, but Crawford was able to take advantage of it and catch him with the body shots, and just dominate him. He made the fight look really easy. And he just, he showed real class, and in spite of the fact that he didn't control Indongo with his lead hand like I thought he would. He just had a perfect game plan for taking away Indongo's offense and fighting off of his style and his technique. So you really get the sense that Crawford studied his opponent really well, and it paid dividends for him. So congratulations to Crawford for smashing Indongo. Even though, most people didn't think that the fight was really going to be any trouble for him. I particularly didn't think that Indongo had a chance in hell to beat Crawford. But another interesting topic is, where does Crawford go from here, right? He wants to be recognized as the pound-for-pound number one, and usually I don't subscribe to this kind of talk or these kind of arguments. I don't really care, the mythical pound-for-pound, whatever. It's your own list. Who do you think is the best fighter of any weight class, right? That's you, right? Nobody... HBO doesn't get to tell you. Showtime doesn't get to tell you. Ring Magazine doesn't get to tell you, especially since Oscar De La Hoya owns Ring Magazine, I think. That's why Saul Canelo Alvarez is the middleweight champion. Stupid. But all of these groups have their own special interest, right? And you might like Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman more than you like whoever the fuck the Showtime guys are. Paulie Malignaggi and Al Bernstein? Jim Gray? I don't know who they are. I think those are the guys. Maybe those are the old guys from back in the day. I'm not sure. So maybe you like those guys better, so you subscribe to their pound-for-pound list, or this guy's pound-for-pound list, or maybe, who is pound-for-pound doesn't really matter, right? It's another level to talk about boxing and of interest and intrigue and water cooler talk. But if we're going to indulge that, let's kind of break it down a little bit, Was Crawford pound-for-pound number one before this fight, right? If you thought he was pound-for-pound number one before this fight, then you think that then you're going to think he's number one after this fight, right? Is the accolade of gaining a belt or two more? I'm not sure if it was two. I don't know. Forgive me. I don't usually care about that kind of stuff. It's not, it's not my domain. But is gaining a belt or two and unifying the division or becoming the undisputed champion in a division by beating, not doing that, not succeeding, right? It doesn't matter if you succeed and you wind up doing this. Those titles, that all hinged on the fact that he did it by beating Julius Indongo, right? Adding undisputed to your um, your resume, it doesn't matter. Like in most people's opinion, Crawford was already the undisputed champion. No one at 140 was already going to beat him. Who thought that Julius Indongo was going to beat him? You know, so in my opinion, you know, it doesn't necessarily do anything for him to beat this guy. He was, I don't want to say a paper champion, but Ricky Burns. He got his title from Ricky Burns, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know who he got it from, but that's somebody. If that is true, that's somebody that Crawford already beat. You know, so this doesn't make any sense. You know, not that there's anything wrong with Crawford being in the pound for pound discussion. I'm just saying that beating in Julius Indongo doesn't do anything to help his pound for pound status, in my opinion. I don't think that. And then like thinking about like Gennady Golovkin, right? Gennady Golovkin has like 20 something title defenses or something like that. Like maybe it's 19 or almost 20. You know, at the middleweight division. Is he the undisputed middleweight champion? Right? Billy Joe Saunders is the only person that has another title at that weight class, and everyone who, I don't know, unless Billy Joe Saunders fans, right? But everyone thinks that he's going to beat Billy Joe Saunders. So doesn't that make him just automatically at the moment, you know, undisputed, right? The undisputed middleweight champion, right? Billy Joe Saunders is the one with something to prove in any case, right? He's the one that has to prove that he can beat Golovkin because Golovkin has all the titles, right? Except for one. You know, does anybody think that Canelo Alvarez is the middleweight champion? When has he ever even fought at the middleweight limit, right? So beating Canelo Alvarez is not going to really do anything for Gennady Golovkin in terms of his pound. Well, it's in terms of his pound for pound because I don't. It gets a little complicated, you know. I don't know why Canelo is on a pound for pound list anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But if you're saying that because of the titles and because of undisputed, that's why Terence Crawford has claim to being pound for pound number one, so does Golovkin in that regard, right? Do you think that, and now while they're both undefeated, right, I think that Dominic Wade is a better fighter than Julius Indongo. Dominic Wade, is that the right guy? The left-handed guy? Is that Willie Monroe? I don't know. One of those guys. You know, they're both probably better fighters than Julius Indongo. But does that give either of them the claim for being pound for pound number one? Does beating Canelo grant you pound for pound number one? Will we say Crawford's pound for pound number one today, and then tomorrow when if Golovkin beats Canelo or Canelo beats Golovkin, are we going to say that either of them are pound for pound number one? I don't know, you know, but how does if Crawford winds up getting pound for pound number one today, how does he lose pound for pound number one because those two fight, right? So the pound for pound theory and whatever, like, it's very strange. But going for what we know today, right? Going back to what we know today, the other fighters, there are two other fighters that could kind of vie for pound number one in this regard, in my opinion. And those are Vasily Lomachenko and Andre Ward. Now, Vasily Lomachenko, for most people's pound for pound list, I don't have a problem with people saying that he cannot be pound for pound number one because he lost to Salido, right? Foul, contested fight, like whatever. I don't have a problem with people saying he can't be pound for pound number one. In my opinion, he's pound for pound number one. He has the most skills. He hasn't, you know, obviously it's tough for him to get fights where he's fighting the best, right? You know, in my opinion, Rigondeaux was ducking him, not the other way around. But now that Rigondeaux's career is kind of stalled out and he doesn't have anybody to fight, while as Vasily Lomachenko's career has skyrocketed, all of a sudden it's a huge fight and Rigondeaux's not the one taking the chance fighting him. It's the other way around. Lomachenko's taking the chance fighting him because he's a bigger name, he's more money, right? But that not being here nor there, you've got Vasily Lomachenko, who has one loss on his record, and it was, you know, semi-recently, you know. So I can see how some people could say he's not the pound for pound number one fighter. He's my pound for pound, right? If I have to put a name to it, he's mine. But I can see how people can say he's not pound for pound number one, right? But moving on, let's move on to Andre Ward. Now, his last two fights, you know, the fact that people still watch my stupid round 8 film study on fouls and foul study, like they talk shit about the headbutt and they try to tell me that they weren't low blows, and they try to shows that the fight still has controversy. You know, you can't escape it. But history is always going to remember that Andre Ward has 2 wins over Sergey Kovalev. Now, in my opinion, Crawford could have fought 2 Julius Indongos at the same time and beaten them both. And that still wouldn't have been as big of an accolade as having a knockout win over Sergey Kovalev. Sergey Kovalev is a fucking monster of a fighter, you guys. He is a phenomenal fighter. And he was on the pound-for-pound list, right? I don't know what ranking he had before the Andre Ward fights or what ranking he has after them, but he was definitely up there. He is an incredible fighter. Very, very, very talented fighter. But things didn't go his way in the Andre Ward fights. They were both close fights. I do think that Andre Ward was going to stop Kovalev, even without the low blows. I think that he could have done it. So I do give Andre Ward credit for the win. But you know, controversy aside, if you like most Andre Ward fans give credit to Andre Ward for that win, there's no way in hell that Crawford has anyone on his resume that's as good as Sergey Kovalev. You know, he just doesn't. There's nobody on his resume that's even, I don't want to say even half as good, right? But they wouldn't get, you know, the A rating that I would give to Kovalev. You know, maybe like, you know, A- or B+ or like, you know, like really on that line. But Kovalev is a tremendous fighter. Very, very good. And the fact that Andre Ward has 2 wins over him, one being very controversial. Most people thought that Kovalev won the fight. But the second one, you know, the writing was on the wall in spite of the fact that the low blows happened, that Kovalev was, you know, as a lot of people say, fading and stuff. So it's, for the most part, in my opinion, it's still a very valid win over Kovalev. It's just unfortunate that it happened that way. So I definitely think that I would still put Andre Ward over Crawford in that instance, just because Julius Indongo is not really a player. You know, like, where did he get his belts? You know, who did he beat to get them? I don't know. Anyway, so, but I also still, my personal preference for number 1 is still Vasily Lomachenko, and I have my personal is Golovkin, and I guess beating Kovalev would put Andre Ward third in my book, or like in a, you know, in a general sense, you know, most people's book, you could give Andre Ward, you know, 1, 2, or 3, you know, as a very fair, you know, even just flat out saying 1, like a lot of people are saying. But anyway, Crawford's win is definitely in no way, shape, or form as good as 2 wins over an amazing fighter like Sergey Kovalev. Now, the real question is where does Crawford go from here, right? He's got all these titles. Is he looking for a big payday? Is he looking to move up in weight? You know, is he looking to fight Pacquiao next? Is that what it is? I think that might be it, Pacquiao or Horn. Is he going to just abandon his titles? Is he going to pull a Conor McGregor and just fight in both weight classes? Even though that's not exactly what Conor McGregor's doing or was doing. You know, is he going to try to be a champion in both and hold up the titles? Or is he going to fight, you know, is he going to defend the title and fight somebody like Mikey Garcia, which I think would be a phenomenal fight. I still haven't seen Adrian Broner versus Mikey Garcia, which just makes me so sad, because I was really really looking forward to that fight. So I don't exactly know how how Mikey's progressed, right? I've seen some highlights of the fight. Mikey looked phenomenal, but why wasn't he able to kind of stop Adrian Broner if it was as one-sided as I thought it was, or I heard it was? You know, I'll have to see the fight before I can see, and then quantify kind of the skills that he was using to shut Broner down. But maybe beating Mikey Garcia gets Crawford to pound for pound number 1. Or hell, if Vasily Lomachenko doesn't fight next against Mikey Garcia, which could happen, right? So everyone was giving shit to Vasily Lomachenko for fighting Miguel Mariaga, but he decided to fight Miguel Mariaga, I think after Adrian Broner was signed to fight Mikey Garcia, tying up the possibility of a Mikey Garcia fight. But also notice how he fought Mariaga a week after Mikey Garcia fought Adrian Broner, right? Possibly setting up a clash between them, right? Because you have both of those fighters fighting nearly at the same time. In my opinion, I kind of thought that's what was happening. But now we've also got Crawford emerging as the winner just a few weeks after that. So you've got all 3 of these fighters who are pound-for-pound contenders. All 3 of them could fight, you know, any of them, right? They could fight each other. And I do think that if Crawford were to beat Vasily Lomachenko, or Vasily Lomachenko were to beat Crawford, that you would have to give them the pound-for-pound number 1 slot. It's interesting, too, because when they fight, one of them has to win, right? So what do you do with that? Like, what do you do with that information? Like, oh, one of them had to win, so why does one of them have to be pound for pound number 1? Kind of doesn't make exact sense, you know, but I would think that, you know, if any 3 of those fighters fought, the winners of any of those, you know, possible fights could be considered pound for pound number 1, in my opinion. So anyway, pound for pound number 1, you know, beating Julius Indongo? Nah, I don't think so. Still a very good fighter. He had a great game plan and dominated Indongo. And I look forward to seeing where he goes from here. But please, bud, please, do not fight Danny Garcia. Do not. Thank you.